We're going to be in Judges chapter 9 this evening. Judges chapter 9. The cycle continues. Last chapter, we saw that Israel had already turned to sin. Right after the death of Gideon, you look in chapter 8 and verse 33, it says, "And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Balaam and made Baal-berith their god. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of their enemies on every side." We see here that they didn't waste any time getting back to the cycle of sin after the death of their judge, after the death of Gideon. When we get into chapter 9, it is the topic turns to one of Gideon's sons who fancies himself worthy of the throne, decides that he wants to take it, that he wants it over the rest of his brothers. And I think this chapter stands out in that in this instance, the punishment that Israel receives is, instead of being at the hands of a foreign enemy, is at the hands of one of their own, because of the sin that they commit in going against the Lord, in refusing the Lord, going after these other gods, and even as we saw here in 33, even adding gods to it in their evil going against it. And what we see here is really the evidence of the destruction of sin, not only in Abimelech's reign, the son of Gideon, but also we see this taking place as a result of what we saw back in as well in chapter 8 and verse 30, when it says, "And Gideon had 70 sons, which is 70, and of his body begotten, for he had many wives." We see that this is beginning again because of the many wives here. And thinking about sons and causing problems with the throne, my mind goes over to David with his kids, his sons, and the problems that arose from that because of his multiple wives. Really what we have here is chaos because of the Lord allowing it, because of the sin of Israel, but then also it taking place because of a sin on Gideon's part, which shows us this evidence of this in it. So let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll begin with chapter 9. Lord, I thank you that each and every one is here this evening. I thank you for this opportunity we have to study your word, to learn more about you and your will in our lives. I pray that you would lead us and guide us as we're studying your word now. Help us to listen to it, to understand it. I pray that you would guide my words, and that everything ultimately would be for your honor, glory, and your will. In Jesus' name, amen. We begin here and we see Abimelech made king, and Abimelech seeking to be king. We look at chapter 9, beginning in verse 1, it says, "And Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem unto his mother's brethren, and communed with them, and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying." So we see here that Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, and Jerubbaal is another name that was given to Gideon by his father, and in this chapter he is referenced to as Jerubbaal. We see this here. You see it was back in chapter 6 and verse 32 that Gideon was given this name, Jerubbaal. And so this is Gideon's son here, Abimelech, that we are talking about here. And it says that he visits his mother's family and he communes with them, and he begins talking to them. And notice here what he says in verse 2. He says, "Speak, I pray you, in the ears of all the men of Shechem, whether it is better for you either that all the sons of Jerubbaal, which are 70 persons, reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember also that I am your bone and flesh." I say here that Abimelech goes to his mother's side of the family in Shechem, and he tells them, "Hey, I want you guys to go around and tell everybody and talk about this. Now that Gideon's gone, which is better to be king over all? Is it better for it to be these 70 sons split up between 70? Or would it be better for there to be one? And hey, remember, I'm your family. I'm of here." And he's kind of putting it in. He's saying, hey, this is a better thing for both of us, for all of us, that I get to be king here. And it just be me. And so we see in verse 3, it says, "And his mother's brethren spake of him in all the ears of the men of Shechem all these words, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother." We see that his uncles, they agree with him, and they go and they talk to everybody in Shechem, and they tell them these things, and it sways the heart of all the people within Shechem that, hey, Abimelech, he would make a good king. He's the king that we want, and he's one of us. And so he would, that's for our benefit. It's going to help us out. Win-win. So we see verse 4. It says, "And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-berith, wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons which followed him." I say that to show their support of Abimelech, they say, hey, we're going to fund your campaign to take the crown, to take the throne, to be king. And so they give him 70 pieces of silver, and I want you to notice here where they take it. They take it out of Baal-berith, which is another false idol. It was the temple to worship that false idol. And it's interesting here that they got it from this house of this idol. And if you remember, who is actually king of Israel during this time? God. That's why there weren't any other kings, is because God is king. What Abimelech here is doing is overthrowing or attempting to overthrow God. He's denying the Lord. He's rejecting God's leadership. And he's using funds from a false god to accomplish it. And he uses it to hire, it says here, vain and light persons, which basically means that they were worthless and immoral people. They were mercenaries for hire. They weren't good for anything else except for evil things. They weren't good to society and helping things, and they didn't have any standards. They just do whatever the money told them to do. So that's who he went and hired. And he needed these kinds of people for a very specific reason, because if he's going to be the only king, if he's going to be the only one, what do you think he needs to do? Or he thinks he needs to do? Well, he's got 70 other brothers that would also have a claim to a throne if there was one to be had. And so he's going to take care of that. Verse 5, it says, "And he went unto his father's house at Ophrah, and slew his brethren, the sons of Jerubbaal, being 70 persons, upon one stone. Notwithstanding yet, Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, where he hid himself." So he takes these mercenaries for hire, and he goes and he kills, or attempts to kill, all 69 of his brothers. He was successful in taking out 68 of them, and one escapes. This one's going to come back in a little bit. Well, we see here that he's gotten things started off to a pretty evil path, right? So we continue and we look at verse 6. It says, "And all the men of Shechem gathered together, and all the house of Millo went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem." So after he has killed all of his brothers except for one, the men of Shechem, they're still behind him, and they go and they crown him king, as if they have the ability to decide who is king. But I want you to realize something else here. The location where they crown him king is by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. This is in reference to back in Joshua 24, 25 through 26. Let's go ahead and turn over there. It wasn't too long ago that we were looking at this, but let's go ahead and go back to it. 24 and 25. This is after the Lord has, or Joshua has told them to follow the Lord, to put away their false idols, to seek God as their king. And if you look at 24, verse 25, it says, and this is after they say they're going to follow the Lord. Verse 25 says, "So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and set them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God and took a great stone and set it there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord." So I have here that Abimelech is crowned to be king near this pillar, this altar that was meant to be a sign of the covenant between Israel and God. And at the time that Joshua put it down, whether it was still there or not, he also laid a stone that had the commandments, the law of the Lord, written on it. A place that was meant to be a place of recognizing the Lord, of following God, committing to Him, is now the place of outright rejection of the Lord. Outright opposition to Him. I think it's interesting to consider this stone still being there. We think that even with God's word sitting there, they rejected it. What the way that Israel was with their history and things, I think it very possible they knew exactly what this location was, and that's why they chose it. Because they'd made it to be an important place, but they'd now turned it around to a place of sin. It doesn't matter what those in the past set up. It doesn't matter what those in the past do. What matters in the present is what those in the present, the choices that they make, the willingness they have to make the decision to follow God. So we see that he is named to be king, and now in verse 7 we see Jotham, his youngest brother, shows back up. It says, "And when they told it to Jotham, he went and stood in the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted up his voice and cried and said unto them, Hearken unto me, ye men of Shechem, that God may hearken unto you." I think it's interesting here at this point in time, it is not a prophet that comes and speaks out against us, it's just another person. I think it speaks to the maturity of Jotham in this, his, what it seems to be, willingness to follow the Lord, to trust in God, and to see the importance of not overthrowing God as king. But he calls for them to, he's basically his purpose here will be to call them to stop the evil that they are doing before it is too late. Because he tells them, hearken unto me, listen to me, that God may hearken unto you. And he's saying, listen to me so that you don't put God on your bad side, or put you on God's bad side here, so that you don't punished by God. You need to make some changes here. You need to stop what you are doing. They're being given their opportunity to stop. Because if they continue in their evil, God will take action against them. And we're going to see that they'll continue in the evil that they're doing, and God will move against them. But he provides this tale, or this illustration to them to make his point here. It's an interesting illustration too, showing the foolishness of what they are doing, even separate of the Lord. What they were doing was foolishness. We look at 8, and it says, And the trees went forth on a time to anoint a king over them. And they said unto the olive tree, Reign thou over us. But the olive tree said unto them, Should I leave my fatness wherewith by me they honor God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? And the tree said to the fig tree, Come thou and reign over us. But the fig tree said unto them, Should I forsake my sweetness and my good fruit, and go to be promoted over the trees? And then said the trees unto the vine, Come thou and reign over us. And the vine said unto them, Should I leave my wine, which cheereth God and man, and goeth to be promoted over the trees? Well, we see here 3 different instances where he's talking about the people having gone and asked another person to be king. And I want you to notice here that it describes him as being an olive tree, a fig tree, and the vine, which these are very prosperous and valuable plants. Trees and the vine, the grapes, these are very prosperous to them. These are very high in their regard. And it says that they've gone after these 3 different times to ask these other people to be their kings. And most recently, back in chapter 8 and verse 22 and 23, and I want us to go ahead and look at that. Chapter 8, verse 22. It says, And then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. In verse 23, And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Oh, we see most recently here, they come to Gideon and they say, Hey, be our king. And Gideon says, No, God is your king. Follow the Lord. I'm not going to go against the Lord in this. This is a bad choice on my part. And I want us to see as well here, they also mention Gideon, and then they say, and thy son's son also. I think there is also one of Gideon's sons that they saw as being worthy of this, to say that. And I would think probably that son, they probably went to him and asked him to be king too, and he probably said the same thing. No, the Lord is your king. Things are going really well for me because I'm following the Lord. I'm not going to stop following the Lord just so that I can be king. It's a horrible decision. There could have been others too that this illustration here that Jotham is giving is in reference to, but they had already gone at least 3 other times to these other people to ask them to be king, and they were turned down. They were told, no, I will not be your king. And these were worthy people. These were good people. People that you would at least look at as a king and go, they'd be pretty good. Even though it would be against the Lord's will, they say, oh, these are pretty good people here. We'd want them to be king. But they were all turned down because they would rather continue as they were. And so we continue, and Jotham basically tells them, y'all are scraping the bottom of the barrel with this one. Continue to look at verse 14. Back in chapter 9, verse 14, it says, Then said all the trees unto the bramble, Come thou and reign over us. Now, the bramble is basically a thorny bush. So you have the olive tree, you have the fig tree, and you have the vine. And now you got the thorny bush. Now, as far as plants that you want, how many of you are choosing the thorny bush even if you have nothing else? In fact, you'd probably say if it was the last plant on earth, it would be dead. Jotham is going to say here is, he's basically saying it, you should be saying if this was the last person on earth, he wouldn't be king, but you're asking him to be your king. He's a foolish man, a horrible man. I want you to see what in verse 15, he continues with this. He says, And the bramble said unto the trees, If in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow, and if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. And so the bramble says to the trees, the thorn bush says to the trees, trust in me and allow and come underneath my shadow of protection. Now, with a thorn bush, how useful is it as a shadow to block out the sun? In fact, to try and use the thorn bush as cover or protection, you'd probably tear yourself up more than anything else. It's going to damage you more than it would ever have any hope or possibility of helping you. And I don't know if you've tried to climb through a thorn bush before, but you can't make it very far. There's not much room in there. It's short, it's dense. You know, the big needles like that, it's the kind that this would have been, is just big needles. I always call them tractor tire killers, because they can go right through a tractor tire, which is very thick. It's useless. And the bramble says, hey guys, trust me. But then he says, if you don't trust me, you're going to pay for it. Basically, he has nothing to offer, and he's going to kind of twist their arm to get them to continue following him. Now, if they've made him king, he's just going to kind of do whatever he wants to do. And he's going to act like he's helping them, like he's protecting them, but he has no opportunity. Because remember here, we're talking about the bramble and the trees. What good is a thorn bush to the trees? And trees are tall, large, and it calls them the cedars of Lebanon. These are very great trees. They would have no use, no value. You know what's interesting as well about the thorn bush is it's an invasive species. And so because of the way it grows earlier in the year and later than the year than most plants, so it has a longer growing season, and it can survive in almost any environment. It can grow in any environment, and the way it does is it covers the ground and it blocks out the whole light to where no vegetation can grow up in it. We'd have them on the ranch and we'd mow them down, and underneath you would have just straight dirt. There's nothing underneath it. This bramble, the thorn bush, it has nothing to offer that is of value. It's just going to squash everybody out. So verse 16, it continues. It says, "Now therefore, if ye have done truly and sincerely, and that ye have made Abimelech king, and if ye have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done unto him according to the deserving of his hands, for my father fought for you, and adventured his life far, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, and ye are raised up against my father's house this day, and have slain his sons 70 persons upon one stone, and have made Abimelech the son of his maidservant king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother." Verse 19, it says, "If then have ye dealt truly and sincerely with Jerubbaal and his house this day, then rejoice ye in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech, and devour the men of Shechem and the house of Milo, and let fire come out from the men of Shechem and from the house of Milo, and devour Abimelech." So he says, I think sarcastically, if you guys have been doing things right, if you've been doing it the way that it's supposed to be, and you've been acting honorably, and Abimelech's been acting honorably, then things will be great. You can rejoice. You can be excited about what's taking place here. Now, Jotham knows very well that it was not righteous with what was going on, because he was present. He hid to save his own life from his other 68 brothers dying, being killed by Abimelech. And he calls us out, and he says, "You've killed Jerubbaal's sons. You guys aren't acting honorably." And so he says, if you act honorably, then everything's going to be good. But here's the thing. If you're continuing to do evil, if you've been doing evil and you continue to do evil, he says destruction is in your future. Destruction for Shechem and destruction for Abimelech. That you're happy. I think he's given this opportunity here. He's saying, guys, you have a chance to change your path before it is too late. You have your opportunity. Better take it. In verse 21, he says his peace, and then verse 21 it says, "And Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother." He says his peace, and then he hightails it out of there. Knowing full well, Abimelech already tried to kill him once. He'll probably try and kill him again. I don't blame the guy for trying to run. So we continue, giving the story away, they continue doing evil, and the prophecy, in a way, comes true. We see now Abimelech's downfall. First, we see that Shechem turns against Abimelech. Verse 22 says, "When Abimelech had reigned 3 years over Israel, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech." So the alliance that brought them all together is now over. The Lord has placed division between them. Not only a division, but a conflict. Doesn't say how the Lord did it exactly, but he did, to where they were against each other. And Shechem started dealing treacherously with Abimelech. Most likely, I think, with the way Abimelech went, he probably did something wrong to Shechem. Like he said, before it talked about him saying, I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to do all this, and he had no intention of actually protecting them, no ability to protect them or help them. Most likely, he did a multitude of things that justified them turning on him. And the Lord just kind of let it go. They were once allies, but now they are enemies. Verse 24 says, that the cruelty done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood be laid upon Abimelech their brother, which slew them, and upon the men of Shechem, which aided him in killing of his brethren. That the Lord brings this on as recompense for what they had done in killing other brothers, in usurping the throne of God, ignoring the Lord. Verse 25, it says, and the men of Shechem set liers in wait for him in the top of the mountains, and they robbed all that came along that way by them, and it was told Abimelech. We see that the way that they began causing problems for us, they just be sitting by the roads, and they started robbing people. They started taking things. They're probably taking things from Abimelech and his transfers of different things. They're probably causing other problems, causing unrest within the nation and losses for Abimelech. All the while, what they're trying to get at is Abimelech himself. They're trying to draw him out. We continue and look at verse 26. A new character here is introduced for us. It says, and Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brethren and went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. And they went out into the fields and gathered their vineyards and trod the grapes and made merry and went into the house of their God and did eat and drink and cursed Abimelech. Let's see here, this new guy comes along, Gaal. And we don't really know much about him. It seems to be that he's probably a Gentile, most likely. But we don't know much about him. But he comes, and the people of Shechem, they haven't learned their lesson with Abimelech. And they trust in Gaal to protect them, to keep them safe from Abimelech. So they go out on their own. They go out into the vineyards. They go and they get their wine, and they make merry, and they rejoice, and they celebrate, and I think everything's going great for them in their arrogance. Well, Gaal is a pretty arrogant guy too. Verse 28 says, and Gaal the son of Ebed said, who is Abimelech? Who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is not he the son of Jerubbaal, and Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for why should we serve him? And would to God this people were under my hand, then would I remove Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, increase thine army and come out. And it's a very arrogant thing here to say, and that he's supposed to be protecting Shechem, and they've trusted in him, and he's kind of just saying, I can take this Abimelech guy. Who is he? Let's go. Let's overthrow him. Let's take him, and let's just do what we want to do with him. Let him come. Let him build his army up. Let him do whatever he can to try and stop us. We're going to overthrow him. And even it calls out Zebul here as Jerubbaal's officer. And we see here this verse 30, it says, and when Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger was kindled. That Zebul was the leader of was the ruler of the city that he's calling out here. Gaal is just trying to overthrow everybody. He's trying to make himself king. So Zebul hears this, and he gets angry, of course, because they're trying to do something to him too. So we see verse 31, it says, and he sent messengers unto Abimelech privily, saying, Behold, Gal the son of Ebed and his brethren be come to Shechem. Behold, they fortify the city against thee. Now therefore, up by night, thou and the people that is with thee, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be that in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, thou shalt rise early and set upon the city. And behold, when he and the people that is with him come out against thee, then mayest thou do to them as thou shalt find occasion. So he sends a message out to Abimelech, tells them, hey, this is how things are going. This is what's going on. If you do this, you can come and you can win. You can defeat them. So in verse 33 it says, and it shall be that, verse 34 says, and Abimelech rose up and all the people that were with him by night, and they laid wait against Shechem in 4 companies. And Gal the son of Ebed went out and stood in the entering of the gate of the city, and Abimelech rose up and the people that were with him from lying in wait. And when Gal saw the people, he said to Zebul, behold, there come people down from the top of the mountains. And Zebul said unto him, thou seest the shadow of the mountains as if they were men. And Gal spake again and said, see, there come people down by the middle of the land, and another company come alongside the plain of Midonim. And Zebul said unto him, where is now thy mouth wherewith thou saidest, who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Is not this the people that thou hast despised? Go out, I pray now, and fight with them. And Gal went out before the men of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. So you see that they come, and Gal sees them coming, and he mentions it to Zebul about, it looks like there's people coming to attack us. And Zebul says, no, it's just your eyes playing tricks on you. And then Zebul looks over here and he says, well, there's some people over here and there's some people over here coming after us. And so Zebul, he changes it and says, well, hey, weren't you just talking about how this Abimelech was nothing compared to you? Weren't you just talking about how you were going to destroy him and how he should come and he should take you? Now's your chance. Now's your chance to go and take him. Go. Doesn't take much convincing. And Gal runs out after him. Now, verse 40, it says, and Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him, and many were overthrown and wounded, even unto the entering of the gate. Things didn't go quite as well as Gal had hoped, because he's easily defeated and barely makes it back into the gate of the city with his life, and doesn't even really have opportunity. Many are wounded. It's a pretty handily defeat. So verse 41, it says, and Abimelech dwelt at Arumon, and Zebul thrust out Gal and his brethren, that they should not dwell in Shechem. And it came to pass on the morrow that the people went out into the field, and they told Abimelech. And he took the people and divided them into 3 companies, and laid wait in the field, and looked. And behold, the people were come forth out of the city, and he rose up against them and smote them. And Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood in the entering of the gate, and the 2 other companies ran upon all the people that were in the fields and slew them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he took the city and slew the people that were therein, and beat down the city and sowed it with salt. So Zebul kicks out Gal, and he probably thinks that, hey, everything's fine and dandy now. Got rid of this Gal. That was the guy that was causing problems for Abimelech. Abimelech's going to leave us alone. But Abimelech hears that Gal is gone and decides, well, let's go and take Shechem. And he comes and he defeats Shechem, and he comes into the city and he kills everybody that's in the city. He tears down the city, and then he sows salt into the ground, basically making the ground, the city itself, good for absolutely nothing. It's ironic. Shechem made him king because thought it would be good for them. Now the same king is the one that tore them down, destroyed their city. And continues in verse 46. And when all the men of the tower of Shechem heard that, they entered into a hold of the house of God, house of the god Berith. And it was told Abimelech and that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. And Abimelech got him up to the Mount Zalmon, and he and all the people that were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and cut down a bow from the trees, and took it and laid it on his shoulder, and said unto the people that were with him, What ye have seen me do, make haste and do as I have done. And all the people likewise cut down every man his bow, and followed Abimelech, and put them to the hold, and set the hold on fire upon them, so that all the men of the tower of Shechem died also, about 1,000 men and women. So the last of the men hole up within the tower, and Abimelech just goes and burns them alive. Destroys them. Thought that it was going to be a good thing with this king, and 1,000 of them died as a result. We see that for Shechem, their punishment for the evil that they did in helping Abimelech had now been fulfilled. That the entire city was gone. Now we see the destruction of Abimelech. Verse 50 says, And then went Abimelech to Thebez, and encamped against Thebez, and took it. And there was a strong tower within the city, and thither fled all the men and the women, and all they of the city, and shut it to them, and gat them up to the top of the tower. And Abimelech came unto the tower, and fought against it, and went hard unto the door of the tower to burn it with fire. So we see that he goes to Thebez, and he goes to attack them. He's kind of living on the high of what he's just done to Shechem. He goes to Thebez, and it's a similar situation here. They've all holed up in a tower, and Abimelech decides, well, I'm going to burn this one down too. Verse 53, it says, And a certain woman cast a piece of the millstone upon Abimelech's head, in all to break his skull. But this time, a woman throws a stone at him, and it breaks his skull. Verse 54. Then he called hastily unto the young man his armor-bearer, said unto him, Draw thy sword, and slay me. If the men say not of me, a woman slew him. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. Well, I see that he asked to be killed by his armor-bearer because he didn't want to be known for being killed by a woman. Embarrassing for him. So we see that both parties have now paid for their sin. Verse 55, it says, And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed every man unto his place. Thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did unto his father, in the slaying his 70 brethren. And all the evil of the men of Shechem did God render upon their heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham the son of Jerubbaal. I think the example for us here, the lesson really is just follow the Lord. All of this took place, all of this happened because of their unwillingness to follow God, to listen to the Lord. Things would have been prosperous, would have been good, would have been helpful for them. Likely Abimelech was probably a very wealthy man to begin with. Well liked, well favored. He could have done a lot of amazing things. Instead, he got too big for his shoes and tried to overthrow the Lord. He paid the price for it. and got to be king for 3 years. The men of Shechem thought they were getting the king in their back pocket, ended up losing their lives too as a result. Sin doesn't pay, at least not good things. Do we have any prayer requests?